Here are two really nice reflective statements. I think they're both by, I'm not sure if these are amateur or professional astronomers, but it sets the stage for awe. The moment we put our eye, this is Chris Ruler, the moment we put our eye to the telescope for the first time, something magical happens very deep inside of us, and life will never be the same again. I'm sure that all of you here can relate to that. And the second one, which I really like, I just like the images here. The pleasure of amateur astronomy are deeply personal. The feeling of being alone in the universe on a starlit night, cruising on wings of polished glass, flitting in seconds from a point millions of kilometers away to 1 million of parsecs distant is euphoric. I love that phrase, cruising on wings of polished glass. So there we go. That I think conveys a sense of the awe that we feel with astronomy. Astronomy is awesome. And I don't know where I found this, but here's a lovely word that combines that, which you probably have seen before, astronomy. So astronomy from henceforth will be known as astronomy. Now, what is this slide? So as I've spoken about this before at other talks, I believe that there are six, possibly more, six benefits, psychological benefits, or more strictly psychosocial benefits, meaning that they have a strong element of social connectedness, which arise when we practice amateur astronomy and stargazing in a regular and immersive way. And the first one on the left is awe, and that's what I'm going to be talking about. Mindfulness is, or mindful awareness, I prefer that phrase, is not the topic of this talk, so I'm going to kind of skip it and just make a little reference to it at the end. Nature, what do I mean by that? Connectedness to nature. And why do I say that? Because often when we do stargazing, we're in nature-rich environments outside of the city. So the Cederberg, Leeuwenbuschfontein, etc. But also importantly, the sky above us and the contents of the sky are really a part of the wider natural world. And I think this is lost on city-bound inhabitants. We kind of forget this connection to the night sky as being part of nature. And that's something I'm going to say quite a bit about in this talk. Curiosity. So the full thing here is curiosity. Astronomy invites curiosity and exercises cognition. Now, this can be a bit of a tricky one for people, but just think about it. So you can't learn about astronomy without being curious about it and learning more and more. And if you think about, and we know that curiosity, it sort of fosters a sense of well-being and connectedness again and creating meaning in the world. So if you just think about your own lives, think about your professions, or think about your hobbies and your interests, including astronomy, we often find that we find an area of special interest to us, whether it's astrophotography or outreach or whatever. Or if you think about your professional life, in my case, for many years, I just wanted to be, after doing medicine, I just wanted to be a generalist. And then a mentor said to me, when you specialize, you gain insight. And that just really landed for me. And then I subspecialized. So what I'm saying is that every layer of knowledge that you go deeper into, you have to be curious. And that curiosity gets you places. It gets you to a career destination or another destination in terms of interest. Exercising cognition. Now, professional astronomers, I suspect, I haven't spoken to any of them, but I suspect they kind of look askance at that statement. But we must remember that professional astronomers, and we have a budding professional astronomer with us, they are well versed in physics and mathematics, so they're used to these abstract, difficult concepts. But for mere mortals like us, especially if you're from the biological sciences, when you encounter something like the celestial sphere or relativity, um, or sidereal time, things that are straightforward to an astronomer, you actually have to really work to get your head around it, especially if you're an adult. You need cognitive flexibility, you need abstract thinking, and good visuospatial skills. So that's what I mean by that. And I'm going to take a little detour, even though this isn't the main feature of the talk, simply because I came across two things in the last week which I thought were so interesting that I had to include them. So on this theme of cognitive exercise, now, who amongst you doesn't use your cell phone and GPS when you need to find a new address? We all do it, right? So we are increasingly losing our ability to navigate our environment using memory and executive functioning, thanks to smart devices and GPS. Unless you are standing next to Willem at Dievenboschfontein, and he very skillfully, without a go-to, just knows his way around the sky because he's learned the night sky, right? Why is this important? Well, the study was published in the British Medical Journal in 2024, but I just came across it this week. It's an enormous study. It's a population-based cross-sectional study of causes of death of almost 9 million people. Of them, ambulance drivers and taxi drivers had the lowest proportion of deaths due to Alzheimer's disease of more than 400 occupations studied, examined. Now, of course, this is a correlation and doesn't prove causality, as the authors of the article are quick to point out, but it's intriguing and it builds on well-known previous research from a couple of decades. Knowledge of the vast city of London, and picked up a passenger and they would say, I need to go wherever, and the cabbie would just have to know. So they had increased hippocampal volume, which is a part of the brain which encodes memory, and so on. So there's good evidence to suggest that navigating your way around a foreign or different environment is good for the brain. Then there's a National Geographic series called Limitless. Some of you may have heard of it, featuring the Australian actor Chris Hemsworth. Every week, he faced a series of challenges designed to improve physical and mental capacity and strength, and possibly these would further longevity. The last week, has anybody here seen it? I'm just curious, or heard of it. It's really very interesting and very entertaining. So in the last week, the challenge is he gets put in a helicopter and dropped in the Australian outback with just a map and a compass. And he's told, you've got to find us, the base wherever everybody's waiting for him, the TV crew and so on, X number of kilometers away. No cell phone, just got to figure it out. And I thought, this is a strange way to end. Like, what is so remarkable about this? And then the neuroscientist who designed the test went on to explain that these are functions of the brain which we evolved to use. You think about our hunter-gatherer ancestors, and we'll talk more about them. This is how they survived. They were on the move. They had to find their way around, maybe go back. And this, is there's so many negative aspects of, our digital lives. And this is one of them, is that we've lost the ability to find our way around the world. Okay, so that little detour. Sociality means social connectedness. I don't need to explain that to you guys. You all understand. We're part of a society. We link to other societies. So there's a kind of horizontal social connectedness and a vertical connectedness with the professional astronomy community and the public. Enormous work that the outreach people do with the public. So we are very socially connected, and this is part of the appeal of astronomy. And then perspective is my favorite, and I'm still wanting to study this in experienced amateur astronomers. How does spending years looking at the stars change the way we see ourselves and our place in the world, in the wider world? How does it change our worldview? Okay, so the next section, and I'm just keeping an eye on the time, I'm going to be focusing on what I believe. Sorry, so in summary, there's quite a few benefits to stargazing, and we're focusing on awe because I think we've all experienced that. It's one of the reasons that we stargaze. There's another pathway to awe, which is perhaps more accessible to many people and more understandable, and that is nature. And I'm going to suggest that we can build a pathway to the awe of astronomy by using nature as a path, and we'll get there. And I think that all of us, and this may be a useful way of attracting newcomers to astronomy. Living as we do in South Africa, many people will have had an experience of awe in nature because we are surrounded by so much of it. Even living here in Cape Town, the mountain, the oceans, we just have to drive a couple of hours out and we have fantastic landscapes, wildlife. We've got, amazing nature, game reserves and lodges and so on. And we've got an amazing biosphere. And don't forget that Table Mountain and the Western Cape is, we have one of a unique floral kingdom, the fynbos kingdom is unique to Southern Africa. So we've got a lot going for us in terms of nature and experiencing connectedness to nature and feeling awe in nature. And this has inspired a lot of thinking and discussion and research over decades now. And increasingly, again, in a increasingly urbanized and digitized world, there's a very strong pull towards nature and what is it that drives us toward nature. And a nice concept, a nice word, which was coined by a naturalist in the 1980s, is biophilia. Biophilia, philia meaning attraction or drawn to bio, drawn to life. And then ecopsychology. So biophilia is a term derived by Edward Wilson, as I say, renowned naturalist in 1984. It refers to the innate tendency of humans to focus on and affiliate with nature and other life forms. He defines it as the propensity to focus on life and lifelike processes. It shouldn't surprise us to learn that we are hardwired at a neuronal and brain level to feel an affinity with nature because we evolved from it. We're not cyborgs yet. We are flesh and blood, organic, carbon-based creatures. We evolved from nature, so of course we feel part of it, but many of us have forgotten that connection. This has led to the connectedness to nature construct, which is a psychological construct, which has been studied, and there's various instruments or scales which can be administered to people to see where they fit in their connectedness to nature. And the related field is ecopsychology and deep ecology, which really is just, exploring that concept a bit deeper. What does it mean to feel connected to nature, and how does that change the way we see ourselves in the world? Now, I like to argue that outer space is part of the wider natural world, and in fact, it's the ultimate wilderness. You can't go beyond that. It's the ultimate wilderness. And what are we doing? The same that we do as humans to every wilderness that we find. We are messing it up, to put it mildly and politely. So this is partly why I've, volunteered to be the dark sky promoter is I'm interested in this, and this won't be news to you. As amateur and professional astronomers, we feel this sense of urgency that we can't let the sky be damaged to the extent that it looks like it will be over the next few decades. So I didn't put a link here, and I can't, you can Google it, but I know the Guardian newspaper a few months ago had a very nice graphic where they showed, in real time, like what do you call it, an accelerated time graphic of the number of satellites that have been around since the 1950s, and you just see this shell developing around the planet, this network, and it just gets thicker and thicker. And what I feel really upset about, I don't know how many of you have read this, it's been popping up in the news over the last few months. In addition to SpaceX's, million satellites, there's a US company called Orbital Reflection. And their bright idea, excuse the pun, is to put satellites in space, which will reflect sunlight onto the Earth and use it for power. The problem is they want 53,000 satellites to be in orbit by 2035, and each will contribute as much light as a full moon. So I was standing outside last night looking at the almost full moon and thinking, I can't conceive of this. If the sky is full of these dots, we're not going to be able to see the sky anymore. It's actually tragic. And I know that professional astronomy organizations around the world are mounting petitions against this. And I think Ed Foster actually posted a petition on one of the Facebook groups. So countless studies, and I put an asterisk because again this week I found a new systematic review of existing literature that's at the bottom, which was published last month. The effectiveness of nature-based intervention in mental health and psychological benefits include improved, there we are, back to cognition, beneficial effects on boredom, levels of friendliness, motivation, and sense of well-being. And interestingly, there's a lot of physical benefits, including quicker recovery from illness, and this has been well studied, reduced or cause mortality rates, increased physical relaxation with improvements in cardiovascular indices of health. There's at least two major theories, the attention restoration theory proposed in the 80s, and the other one also in the 80s, the stress reduction theory. Nevertheless, the exact causative mechanisms remain elusive and are difficult to investigate in a naturalistic setting. The reason for this is you need to do things like, monitor physiological markers and ideally see what's going on in the brain. It's very difficult to do EEG studies and stick people in functional MRI scanners in the middle of a forest or we just don't have that level of technology yet. So all of these things are theories. So I showed this slide at one of the event horizons. Lisha and I were in Gauteng at a game lodge in January last year. And the sentence at the top is from a study recently published. We feel better emotionally when we're in biodiverse places, not just basic green spaces. So in other words, if you're in a game reserve, you get more benefit than if you're in the neighborhood park. Okay. So here, this is an amazing place where you could walk around literally, and there would be all these wonderful animals, but you'll notice that it was overcast. And we were hoping that it was going to be clear skies because we just had the sense that if you could do stargazing in that kind of environment, it would just feel a little bit more meaningful and connected. That's what I think. So yeah. So the question, particularly for newcomers to astronomy who might be nature enthusiasts, whether they're surfers or hikers or mountaineers or whatever, is how do we convince people that it's possible to shift a connection from the purely terrestrial to the celestial? So Yeah, just some more personal stuff just for interest, but it does make a point. This is a more recent trip to the Karoo in May. Now, what do you notice about that? It's very green. Have you ever seen the Karoo so green? This is just beyond Montague, and there's a conservation project there, tens of thousands of hectares, funded by European money, and their plan is to rewild the Karoo with the big five and predators and so on. So accompanying us on this trip was my cousin and his wife, who was visiting from Barcelona, and they'd never been in the Karoo before. And even though it was pouring with rain again, that's why it's so green. And we were taken on these game drives in 4x4s with rain pelting down and everybody wearing ponchos and things. They were mesmerized by the landscape. In other words, they were in awe of it. And they said, we've never seen anything like this in our lives before. And it feels like this landscape has not changed in millions of years. And they were spot on there. That was just an intuition that they had, that this is primordial landscape and it just draws you in and it feels amazing. Now, the place we were staying at had a viewing deck and an 8-inch dobby. And again, I thought, well, if we could see the stars, it would be an extra special experience, but we were completely rained out. So once again, didn't have that experience. But I think you get my point, is that if people feel connected to the environment, then when they look up, they will feel a similar sense of connection. Oh, and the biodiversity. I don't know if this point is working. Yes. I don't know if you can see this. There, these game ranges are amazing. Can you see against the rocks? There are either eland or oryxes, I forget now, but there they are. And here, of course, in the bottom left are elephants. There's a cheetah in the middle. There are buffalo and rhino. So again, this amazing experience of being connected to biodiversity. And again, knowing that you're in one of the unique floral biomes of the world. So I'm speaking to the converted, but I thought, how would one brainstorm this? So if you were talking to one of our astronomy beginners, you could say, well, can you imagine the natural world, our planet without a sun, which creates the green and, the seasons and so on? And the answer would be obviously no. The sun is an integral part of how we view nature, even though it's far away. And then we just ask people to make a conceptual leap. Well, actually, the sun is the same as all the stars in the sky. So we know that majority of them have solar systems, probably trillions of exoplanets all around the galaxy and beyond. And we also know that stellar matter from exploding supernovae disseminates organic components of life like carbon, nitrogen, and heavier metals like iron, which are taken up into our bodies and into all living beings on this planet. So when you look at it like that, it's not difficult to see that actually we are not, yes, we're this little life buoy floating in space, but we're possibly not isolated, not alone. The universe is probably teeming with primordial life. I think life like us is rare, but I think it's teeming with at least the building blocks of life. So we can get some lessons from astrobiology as well. And here are two studies published in Nature, very prestigious journal this year. I don't know how many of you came across this, but a Japanese team recently discovered 5 nuclear bases in samples from the asteroids Ryugu and Bennu. I mean, that is absolutely astounding. And I'll show you why in a minute. And then there was a recent discovery by Spanish astronomers, very recent, was published a week ago, I think, or a couple of weeks ago, of the sugar ethyl Erythrolos, that's it, near the center of our galaxy. And sugars are essential biomolecules serving as metabolic fuels, nucleic acid backbone components, and structural or energy storage polymers. And if that all sounds incomprehensible, there we go. That's familiar pictures, DNA and RNA, and the nuclear bases, cytosine, guanine, adenine, uracil, and thymine. They've all been discovered on asteroids, suggesting that, as I said, life is, or the building blocks of life are far, far more widespread than we thought. And this is no surprise to astrobiologists who I think have been well aware of this for a long time now, or suspected this for a long time. So here what I'm suggesting is that if we look at life like this, then it's a tool. It's a way we can say, okay, nature isn't just limited to here, it's actually all around us. You don't have to agree with me, but I think it's an idea. Another way to understanding a connection to the night sky as part of our natural world is to look at how our ancestors viewed the sky. So I'm not talking about our ancestors from a few hundred to a few thousand years ago. I'm talking about many hundreds of thousands of years ago. So just for interest, a reminder that the early hominids, who were around about 2.8 million years ago, including the various Homo genuses and G9 species, which I've listed there, including, of course, Homo naledi, which means star and was discovered in Gauteng. They were all looking up at the same sky. So the landscape changes, we evolve, but the sky remains the same. That's the backstory or the backdrop. When we look at our own species, Homo sapiens, we've been around for approximately 300,000 years. And if we bring that down to a very local look, local level of awareness, then the hunter-gatherer Khoisan likely diverged from East African populations as long as 160 to 200,000 years ago. It's a long time ago. The Tlum, a San group of people, were amongst the original inhabitants of the Karoo, including the land upon which the SKA project is situated. The SK, and I think this is talking about poetry, I think this is a lovely and profound poetic idea, is that the SKA will therefore assist in constructing a scientific perspective of the dawning of our universe while situated on land in which the earliest human inhabitants of the planet lived and gazed up at the stars. Fortunately for us, their language, way of life, and cosmology were documented by two linguists, Wilhelm Bleek and Lucy Lloyd, just down the road in Mowbray, Cape Town, in the late 1800s. And for those who are interested, their work has been curated by the Michaelis School of Art at UCT and is available online at those links below. So we know a bit about their cosmology as follows. They had an intimate and animistic relationship between the people and the environment in which sky objects were personified. What does animistic mean? Animistic means attributing qualities or characteristics, lifelike qualities or characteristics, to inanimate objects as though they were alive. Okay. So in these indigenous cosmologies, the sun, and this is not limited to South Africa, of course, but we're talking about local cosmologies, the moon, the sun, and the stars, even red and white stars, each color having a specific meaning, and the Milky Way arose from events which occurred on Earth. Not necessarily at a point in time ago, but events which are ongoing, because the universe is seen as being in a constant state of co-creation with the Earth and the inhabitants of the Earth. So the sky was not a remote, incomprehensible space. And of course, this is, in the pre-scientific area, it wasn't something to be studied as such either, but instead it was seen as an integral part of the landscape. Now, why am I talking about this and where am I going with this? And you might think, what is this all about? Well, we'll get there. So if we look at more recent ancient peoples far north of us, um, and we look at the signs of the zodiac and the ancient and Greek depictions thereof, what do we see? Animals, people, and objects. So again, there was a personification of the sky, that seeing the sky as living and telling stories, telling myths. Um, when I say people, I know that most of them were gods, but I mean they were in human form in the sky. And Pythagoras spoke of music of the spheres, where music was seen as reflecting the mathematical relationships and proportions found in the universe. It was harmonious but inaudible. And I had to put this in the big five of the Southern African skies, which I believe were identified by people mostly based in Cape, at the Cape Center. Um, I can't remember what they are. We can discuss it maybe in the discussion, if anybody can remember. It's well known things like Eta Carinae and so on. The big five of the Southern African skies. Now, why do we call it the big five? Because again, there's this intuitive desire to personify the sky. We've got the big five on the terrestrial surface of the earth, and we want to put it up there as well because that's who we are. We want to connect with the sky. So my question to you is, how do we moderns view the ancient ways of relating to the stars, and what can we learn from them? And I just want you to think about that for 5 seconds. Like, when you hear about all of this, what is your kind of thinking about it? My sense is that many of us have a slightly what is the word? Dismissive, oh, well, those were ancient stories and they were myths and you know, it was superstition and so on and so forth. But was it really, or was it actually an attempt to fulfill a connection to the sky which we have now lost? So I would suggest that if we use our relationship with nature as a model and we transfer that to our relationship with the sky, and as I say, I know I'm talking to the converted, we will come to see the sky as not dark and, inhospitable and strange and scary because we like sitting inside and watching Netflix, but as something familiar, comforting, soothing, and something that we can view in a spirit of friendly curiosity. And even for myself, when I go to Leeuwenbushfontein and it starts to dusk settles, and then you see a familiar planet or a star, I kind of feel like, oh, there's my old friend, Orion, or the belt or whatever, or Jupiter or Mars. Because in a world where everything is in flux, the stars remain the same. So it's actually easy to build a relationship with them. So this is by no means a new idea. A psychologist called Kelly in 2003 came up with a bit of a hectic word, Noct Caelador, which is Latin, and it's combining night and to adore. So it's adoration of the sky, literally. And he defined it as interest in and psychological attachment to the night sky. More recently, a UK psychologist, Barnes, has devised a 12-item instrument called the Night Sky Connectedness Index. And it would be actually really interesting if we all did it and just see how we scored on it. And I'll end this section with an invitation for those of you bold enough to go there to listen to this podcast. I can't remember the name of the presenter or read his name. It's too small, but this is a really interesting thinker who's got a podcast series called the Emerald Podcast. And this one is called Animism is Normative Consciousness. And he argues that the historical worldview where humans perceive the world as alive and interconnected and shaping our understanding of existence and relationships is actually the way we instinctively and intuitively see the world. and that science has to a large degree discouraged us from doing this. And so if you're a pure scientist, and I know some of you here are, it will be provocative to the point of offensive, but it's very well researched, very well presented. It's got an amazing soundtrack which accompanies it, and it's compelling. So there you go. And sorry, this ends the section. The conservationist Lawrence van der Post and writer spent a lot of time with the Khoisan. I don't know if the story is true, if it's apocryphal, but it's reported that he was sitting with some of the Khoisan inhabitants talking about the stars, and they asked him, "Can you hear the stars sing at night?" And he said, "No." And they said, "You can't?" And he said, "No." And they were apparently profoundly saddened at this. Like, this stranger can't hear the stars sing, something we take for granted. So this inspired a poem, so we're back to poetry, by the American poet David Wagoner in 1997 called The Silence of the Stars. And you can have a look for that online. It's very long, so I'm not going to read the whole thing. But I thought I can't call it a paragraph because it's just one long thing, several pages long, but I'll read the last bit to you. So I think it's just interesting. I look at the stars again as I first did to school myself in the name of constellations and remember my first sense of their terrible distance. I can still hear what I thought at the edge of silence were the inside jokes of my heartbeat, my arterial traffic, the sea above high sea of my inner ear, myself tunelessly humming, but now I know what they are. My fair share of the music of the spheres and clusters of ripening stars, of the songs from the throats of the old gods still tending even tone-deaf creatures through their exiles in the desert. It's just full of nice images and ideas. Okay, so I will endeavor to finish this in the next 20 minutes, so that we finish within an hour. If there's any questions or pauses or comments, now is the time before I get into the second half on Awe, or should I just carry on? Yeah. Okay, so this is a repeat of a talk I gave in February or March, so apologies if you've heard this before, but I've tried to show you that, I've tried to create the idea that we naturally feel awe to nature, and if we see the sky as part of the natural world, then it should be easy to feel awe for the sky as well. And what is awe? Well, the dictionary definition is, as you read it there, and you'll notice that there's some negative stuff there. Dread, could be veneration. So you've got this polarity that is inspired by overwhelming greatness. Jennifer, with a wonderful surname Stella from Toronto, in this context, describes awe as an emotion that we feel in response to something or someone that is extraordinary and challenges you the way you think about the world. So there's a lot of interest in this, and the emerging literature strongly suggests that experiencing awe is good for us. So it's not just that, we feel awe, it's also that awe has therapeutic potential. It's got transformative potential. It can change the way we see ourselves in the world. And I'll get to that in a minute. A pioneer in this field has been Dacher Keltner, psychologist in the US, and he's written a book called The New Science or The New Science of Everyday Wonder and How It Can Transform Your Life. You can get it on Take-A-Lot. It's a good read. This is from Brené Brown's book, Atlas of the Heart, which is basically just a compendium of emotions and what we know about emotions. So what is the difference between awe and wonder? Well, the short answer is that wonder conveys, it's pretty much the same, but it carries with it a desire to learn, that curiosity that I was talking about earlier. But I'd love the fact, if we just stick to the left-hand side, that the illustrator chose the sky and the night sky as the perfect vehicle to demonstrate awe. And you can see how it looks, how it feels is expansive, and what it does to us. You'll see that the man now suddenly seems bigger than the other people, and he's become translucent, and he's happy, and he's expanded. And this is what awe does to us. It makes us feel elevated and expansive and in the moment, very much in the moment. And that's why I think it links with mindful awareness, which is all about being in the moment. So if we just dive a little bit deeper into the psychological aspects of awe, it's the feeling of being in the presence of something vast. That's the keynote that transcends your current understanding of the world. So if you're standing looking at the Milky Way with dark adapted eyes, and instead of looking for things through a telescope, but you just stand there and just look at it, that sense of vastness will settle on you. Together with the mystery of the sky, where did it all start? How did it start? How's it going to end? So the vastness, mystery, and the dissolving of boundaries between the self and others. The vastness may be physical, as in looking at the universe, perceptual, and I'm guessing maybe swimming in the ocean conveys that. Semantic, meaning something that you come across like a theory or an idea that is just so vast and mind-blowing, or psychological. And for me, the psychological epitome of awe, unfortunately, is, well, it may be many things, but an example that I think really demonstrates it is death. When we're confronted by death, there's a sense of vastness and mystery, and how do we make sense of this? There's nothing like death to really bring us close up front to the limits of what we don't understand or know. And importantly, there's an accommodation and integration of a diminished sense of self. So if you're looking at the Milky Way, you realize that you're just completely insignificant, into a wider picture of the outside world. And Keltner and his colleagues did research with thousands of people, cross cultures across the world, and they came up with 8 types of awe. He didn't put nature first, but I'm putting nature first because we've been talking about it. And so we don't need to spend more time on that. Interestingly, the top one is moral awe or beauty. Feeling awe at other people's courage, kindness, strength, or overcoming. Collective awe, like being in a World Cup game, I guess, going to a wedding, a graduation, etc. Music, again, I think that's self-explanatory. Visual design, fantastic art, architecture, geometric designs, spiritual and religious awe, life and death, and epiphanies. So 7 types of awe. Did I say 8? Sorry. And I think that astronomy ticks 6 of them. So we experience a collective sense of awe. And we know this when we're on Leeuwenboschfontein and somebody says, I found it. Willem, you found the biggest asteroid once. What is it? Yeah. Everybody was so excited. Nature ticks the box, obviously. Visual design. Now, I want to put the word design in brackets because I'm just being faithful to Keltner's classification, but let's just say visual splendor, because I don't want to suggest that the universe was designed in any way, although some people may believe that. Spiritual and religious awe, life and death, and epiphanies. Well, spiritual awe and religious awe, I think, speak for themselves. We have a sense of the transcendent. Some people who are religious will have heightened senses of faith and religious awe. Life and death, we know that the universe had a beginning. We know that stars go through life cycles, which makes us think about our own lives. And epiphanies. And for me, an epiphany, a theoretic, epiphany from physics was relativity. It's just like, wow, it's just amazing that we understand space and time to this extent, and that it's completely counterintuitive. So that's for me one of the if I just listed some things that speak to me, that's one of them. But we don't need to limit ourselves to the physical size and structure of the universe. We can also look at the amazing technology that goes into the telescopes and the satellites and the orbiting telescopes and the data collection, and just think about the SKA and the vastness of it. There you go. It's vast. It's awe-inspiring. Yeah. And I've said this before, that when we were at the SKA site, I was as in awe of the high-tech SKA as the wood poles, PVC pipes, and chicken wire of the Hera telescope. Some personal favorites are seeing Scorpion, Orion and Scorpius on opposite horizons at Fontaine. I mean, that just, I actually saw that for the first time last year, ever in my life, and it just blew me away. Aspects of indigenous cosmologies, which I've spoken about, the life cycles of stars and black holes and relativity. The black holes one is interesting. Some of you may have been aware of this interesting idea that I think is gaining traction, and it's based on examining the rotational spin of galaxies and finding that roughly 75% of what we can measure, that the spin is in the same direction. I don't understand the maths behind it and the physics, but apparently it suggests that our universe could be inside a black hole. And that is completely mind-blowing. So, yeah, wow. No, take your pick. Whether it's James Webb or just seeing Saturn or thinking about relativity, or this is from the Millennium simulation from Max Planck, the large-scale filamental structure of the universe. So, I'll just go quickly through these because I know it's getting late now. Just to say that there's some paradoxical aspects of awe. So you feel small, but at the same time, you're at the center of the experience. So you are taking center stage. At the same time, your sense of self is diminished. As I mentioned, you can get positive versus negative awe. So negative awe really is being in the sense of something that's awesome, but potentially destructive, whether it's a world leader or a tsunami or, something like that. Or we've been talking about big stuff, but it equally applies to the small. So if we look at things through electron microscopes, we see incredible detail, which can be as awe-inspiring as looking at a galaxy through a telescope. And this is a tardigrade, so-called aquatic bear. It's a tiny microscopic creature. I chose it because it featured somewhat cheesily in a Star Trek episode, and there was apparently a giant tardigrade, and also because they've sent tardigrades out into space and found that they have survived the vacuum and colder space. So they're quite interesting creatures. I'm going to skip straight to the psychological benefits of awe, which have been well studied. They include increased pro-social behaviors. Pro-social meaning doing something where one is not at the center of the transaction, but is doing it for the benefit of others, including kindness and sharing. Increases humility, gratitude, and optimism. Is associated with increased social connectedness, increased life satisfaction, and increased life satisfaction. And these have been studied in laboratory and field settings, from narrative and diary accounts. And they study people who have dispositional awe, meaning they have a high tendency to experience awe, and those in whom awe has been induced. And they're very clever research psychologists have found ways to do this and to study this. So this is all very nice and perhaps pie in the sky, but how can we, as it were, how can we cultivate awe in our daily lives without trekking out to the nearest observatory or to the Karoo? So I don't suggest we hunt for it. I think we will know it when it presents itself to us. And we will know it when we experience a sense of vastness, mystery, a temporary cessation of the chatter of the mind, and an accompanying sense of expansiveness or spaciousness. And this can be experienced in day-to-day life and during apparently mundane activities. So switching on the radio or, Spotify or whatever, and listening to an amazing piece of music. being in awe of, spending time with a loved one. If you just think about it and think of the eight categories of awe, it's not difficult to come up with ways that we can experience awe. The concept created by a researcher in the States is called awe walks, and you may want to try this. These are regular walks of short duration, 10 to 15 minutes, with no cell phone distractions. That's an important and essential instruction, is you must not take your cell phone with you to take photos or to be distracted by phone calls. Leave it behind, preferably in novel settings where there may be a sense of vastness. And it could be urban settings where there are skyscrapers or tall buildings, or natural settings. If finding a novel setting is difficult, attention can be paid to finding new details in familiar settings. Vastness can be at a grand scale, and if this is not accessible, then looking close up at the details and patterns of small objects, like a leaf or a flower, is an acceptable substitute. And it is important that a childlike sense of wonder, as though experiencing the environment for the first time, is brought to the awe walk activity. Okay, and now we're just wrapping things up, and I'm looking at those 5 or 6 rather benefits which I explained at the beginning, and 5 of them linked together very nicely. All of this is supported by literature and by findings, so I'm not going to spend time on this. But if we look at awe and wonder and go clockwise around the circle, it obviously is related to connectedness to nature. Its wonder is strongly associated with curiosity. We experience awe collectively, so that's the sociality. And mindful awareness and awe both have the sense of expansiveness and being very much in the present moment. You're not anywhere else when you're in a state of awe. You're not thinking about what you're going to have for dinner or what you did yesterday. You are very much in the present. So I'm going to skip over that because that unpacks that in a bit more technical detail. And I want to end by saying, or near the end, by saying that the well-known overview effect is all about awe, and we know that astronomers throughout the decades, and including the Artemis crew, if you listen to their testimony on YouTube, it's just amazing how they just talk about the overview effect, which is basically a transformed view of the planet and our place upon it. I can't remember, was it Christine or Christina, one of the astronauts? Yeah, that's right. Thank you. Said when she was quite overcome with emotion, and she said she had this realization, planet Earth, you are a crew. I think it was something like that. Planet Earth, you are a crew. So just this perspective on how we can or should be all working together on the planet rather than fighting with each other. So to conclude, astronomy and the activity of stargaze facilitate access to a powerful emotional state which enhances physical and psychological well-being. It's a valuable asset in an increasingly unstable and distressing world, and cultivate it and savor it whenever it appears in your life, preferably through stargazing and joining the Cape Center. And in this vein, I want to end, I'm just promoting this book because I got a copy of it recently and I just love it. It's called Hugged by the Night, and it's the text is, it's a children's book. It's hardcover, it's not very thick at all. It's just a short story, but beautifully illustrated. The text is by an American poet, and the illustrator is a local artist, Carabo Poppy, and she was interviewed in the Daily Maverick a few months ago, and she just brings these amazing colors to the story, and it fills you with awe to read it. And I'm suggesting it to you because it's a good gift to give to your friends or families who have young kids. And if you want to get them interested in looking at the night sky, get them a copy of this book, because it's also supporting local local art. And there's a one of the graphics, and you can see the kind of story that it tells. Deep in the jungle, at the highest height, a jaguar perched and took in the sight. So it's a story about this girl and the adventures she has in the night with the animals and the night sky. And then we're going to end with this another quote by Robert Burnham Jr. The amateur astronomer has access at all times to the original objects of his study. The masterpieces of the heavens belong to him as much as to the great observatories of the world. And there is no privilege like that of being allowed to stand in the presence of the original. And I think that touches on a lot of things. Awe and just the amazing privilege we have as humans to be able to look at and study the sky. And thank you.